On the topic of accountability, we should also pivot to another piece of news, which is that obviously you went on Travis Stafford's interview show and you said that it's not even just that, like, this is the team's doing, or essentially Riot lied about like where they were in their plans here or what they were and weren't going to do. What's the significance of that part? Like, is that, for example, like, is any element of the walkout sort of a way of making it like, well, if you won't like communicate with us, this is why we also take the action? Is the action just to make essentially a statement in a way?
I mean, certainly actions are there for making statements. And that is absolutely a part of it. Riot did lie to us. We worked, and I meet with people at Riot at every level of Riot every single week. Different people. A lot of our meetings are bi-weekly. At least once a month with the commissioner, plus texting and messaging on Discord all the time over events as they're happening. Right? Emails, constant. That's most of my job is talking to them and then feeding it back to players and then synthesizing and coming back with with our points and our asks. And in every conversation we've had this year, the conversation has been, we're only looking at 2024 changes. These are the possible considerations. Nothing will be happening in 2023. And for us to find out from a Pokemon account on Twitter that they were not just already committing to the team owner's preference, but they were doing so in 3 weeks and with no plan at all to actually create a sustainable ecosystem without it. It was shocking to us. And we did go to Riot when they came and told us they were considering this after we heard from the Pokemon account. And we said, hey, like, is this true? They said, yes, we're considering it. And we said, that goes against everything you've told us. That it constitutes an absolute lie. You have deceived us of your intentions, and you have not included us in the process in any meaningful way. And to that point as well, along the way, they have acknowledged multiple times that removing the mandate even in 2024, there was not enough infrastructure in place to actually make a functional league. They've known that. And we've been workshopping, how do we set up guardrails and how do we set up a road to get to a place where the mandate can be removed? And they know they're not there. So I had a lot of conversations with people at Riot who just looked at me like they were being held with a gun off camera, just spouting party lines because they know they don't believe what's being done and what's being said. And it's really disappointing. And we told them, if you go do this, as they did, that we would come out and we would brand them as liars, as they have been, and we would talk about the realities of why this is not working, and we would do everything in our power to help the community understand that this is not a change that's acceptable, that other organizations would understand and demand from Riot changes to make sure that this system actually is functional. We can't tell someone in good conscience that being a long-term member of the tier 2 scene in North America right now makes sense. They don't have a pathway to revenues. They don't have a pathway to viewership. Those things just aren't in place, and it's really disappointing because we want to be in a place where we're helping to build the ecosystem, and we always have been with Riot. They've actually been really good with us in my time, and it's really hard to come on and be so critical because they've worked really closely with us on things like Champions Queue and making, not pulling back the mandate before and finding compromise, and on doing investigations that are hard, like into TSM and into Evil Geniuses and otherwise. Now, these are not easy collaborations for groups that do not have any legal reason to be entangled. And so to come here and talk about this here and in other places it is a statement, because we need to use the bully pulpit in this case to inflict some amount of pain, because there has to be an accountability for these actions. They're harmful to our players and to our scene.
Just to say one thing, I'm totally with you on that. But one of the reasons I'll absolutely tell you I'm taking sort of a hostile tone here is because another thing I'm sick and tired of from pro players who you apparently know better than me, or you have some different sense about what they think about their players. Look, I just said what my own actual conversations with them. I didn't attempt to actually like intuit their mind and what they would think about a teammate and what they would value more. That's for you. You can choose how you speak and I'll choose how I speak. But I'll just say this angle. I do actually think when it comes to this particular topic, I hate when people take one set of actions and they're willing to be bold and they're essentially willing to say, like in this case, like this is not good enough, it will not stand, and I'm going to like step up, I'm going to protest. But for example, you just referenced there like investigations, for example. Like if pro players care so much about other pro players, where was the walkout over the Danny thing? That was an open secret behind the scene. You know that. You literally know that. So you were involved in Evil Geniuses previously. They didn't take any action there. If you don't know, I'll give you a quick example you might not know about from CSGO. In CSGO, they have also a player association association. Now, in that particular scenario, like Richard alluded to earlier, it's not just League where they've taken spots when they make a franchise league. Even when they've done sort of VCT-style partnership agreements in CSGO, like an ESL the Louvre agreement, ESL just took some teams from North America's slot that they'd earned in Pro League and played through for years and used to sell sponsors, and they just gave it to bigger orgs that they wanted to come into their league. When this happened, the Player Association said nothing, did nothing. They even said, what would the point be? We wouldn't win, essentially. So they didn't even do it to send a message, actually. But here's the thing, Philip. I don't know if you're aware of this. They did later the same year take some of the first ever walkout action like you're talking about. What they did was they heard a rumor that the analysts for Blast could hear the comms of the teams, and then there was some weird rumor of like, maybe, you know, someone leaked it to someone. That made the players literally refuse to play a match in Blast and hold the whole tournament up and essentially sort of say like, you know, like, stop this train, like I'm getting off unless this change. So what that showed in that scenario, Philip, was they only cared about their own interests in that case of like, you know, or maybe someone leaked my team info, but they actually wouldn't take action for another player over here. So that's the angle I have the question about, like, is essentially what makes this so key an element of like player action for LCS pros. I understand for Academy. On that one, if I put myself in the Academy shoes or someone like you who wants to see NA talent grow and have a healthy, I get that side. That makes complete sense. I think you're arguing your case well. But if I'm the top NA pro, like I'd almost say, what does it say about me that this is where like I draw the line? But all the other shit, I mean, even the shit we all knew in TSM for years and the shit about Riot, by the way, that was an open secret in the industry too about 4, 5, 6 years ago. So what makes this the key like hot button issue for you guys?
Sure. So I can speak to my 2 years, and mutual respect and collaboration and cooperation are the things that we look to. Danny's situation, we are working in an active investigation in that's been well publicized. And TSM situation, active investigation, where we were involved in the process from start to finish. As long as we see it and can say back to our leadership that we believe that there is, you know, a genuine effort to try and get the right solution, and that we're being involved and we're not being held at arm's length, or it's not being hidden or pushed under the rug in some way, we're absolutely going to continue to collaborate behind the scenes. You know, lockout.
From what I know, for what it's worth, without the LCSPA, PA's involvement and oversight, Riot would have 100% swept that TSM Reginald shit under the rug. Like, it was only the accountability of the LCSPA that kept that investigation going, in my opinion.
That may be, and I want to give credit because for me, the people on the other side of Riot, Chris Greeley and others, you know, when we brought this to them and we talked to them about it and we talked about what the steps would be, they were honest with us and they were collaborators. And we, you know, not everything was perfect, but we were able to speak candidly with one another, and we were able to move the process forward in a way that felt acceptable for everyone throughout the process. Like, that's a really hard thing to do in these situations. And they were always willing, and they always knew that the opportunity that if Riot were to fall short of where we felt things had to be in a certain circumstance, that we're not a rubber stamp automatically. And if let's say the TSM investigation, they had decided that nothing was going to be done or there were no punishments, we had absolutely said, we don't believe that's acceptable, and we would come out and we would oppose those things. So we're always providing where we're at behind the scenes. We're saying, hey, this is where the red line is for us, and can we find a way to stay away from it? And that has historically always been something we've been able to do. Sometimes it takes a lot of conversation, sometimes it takes a little. And I want to give a lot of respect to the people I've worked with over the years, for the most part there, who have always been able to take that feedback without taking it personally and saying, hey, I understand that the bully pulpit is your tool in your tool chest to be able to advocate change and to be able to apply pressure. And that we've always said, we'll come to you first, we'll come behind the scenes, and we will try and find a resolution that works for everyone. We never want to get to there. We don't surprise Riot with anything publicly because we believe we can get to solutions, and we have. And so this instance is extreme because they did lie to us and they did jump us with this, and we didn't even find out from them. Like, these are things that have not been the case in my tenure. And so they are exceptions, and they are exceptions that have resulted in extreme outcomes that have been negative for players. And so we are absolutely, our duty. We are duty bound to speak out against this and to say, if we have a red line, you have crossed it and we have to speak out. And again, even before they made this decision final, we told them this was a red line. They have crossed it, and so we are doing what we feel is our duty. But again, to your question, Thorin, in my tenure, up until now, we haven't crossed that line. We've been able to always work together to get the work done behind the scenes and find solutions. And I'm proud of that. Like, the goal is not to just be up looking for internet points. The goal is to be getting work done to help people. And we're not helping anybody right now. Right now, I got 35 players without a job, more players with diminished compensation, and I've got a scene that's looking like it's not heading in the right direction. Like, we're just suffering. Everybody's suffering right now, and we're out here just talking. And it fucking sucks to just talk on a mic and not actually make a plan and get work done. We put a plan out there. We want Riot to engage with it and talk to us and work like they always have. That's our ask.
So I, on this point, why do you think Riot suddenly turned around and reversed this decision and accelerated it? Because as we've discussed, they've accelerated the payments that they were making, like I said, to the middle of this year. According to you, they've increased the number of payments or giving teams a forward on some of the payments they owe in the future. So why would they suddenly make this decision? What pressure do you think they're under, and why would they basically lie to you all of a sudden?
Well, I think the thing that I point to most closely is Jackie Felling resigning, surprisingly, a little over a month ago, I think now. I think it is causal that there is no commissioner of the LCS today in place for this decision. There is no person who the public will truly hold accountable in the long run for what is being done here today. And at the end of the day, it is a cost-saving measure. Somebody is going to be able to put on their CV that they saved X amount of money for the company by doing this. But nobody is going to be, Chris Greeley or Jackie Felling, neither of them is going to have this hung on them like they would have it happen under their commissionership. And that's important, because someone being accountable for the decision is what makes you not do it in the first place, because it's a disaster and it's not something that that you want to truly be hung on you and something you have to live with. And I think that's the crux of this. We historically, these decisions would have been in conversation with the commissioner, something this big. And I've had these conversations with Chris and with Jackie over the years, and we've talked about other solutions and things they were thinking about. And ultimately, I think it was their product and it was their opportunity to say, no, it's not ready, and I don't believe that this would be good for the league. And I think right now we're in a power vacuum, and I'm in calls with 4 and 5 people at a time, and everybody's playing past the coconut and just not trying to be the one that has to.
I don't know what you're talking about, Phil, because John Needham in an interview said that it was going to be totally fine that there wasn't a new commissioner and that they were just going to do it as a team, and that really all of the best commissioner candidates were already inside Riot, like all the most qualified people. So it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, in this process, we emailed Riot before we published publicly our asks, and asked them to respond. We, historically, if I send an email to Riot, somebody responds pretty quick. We've yet to hear back from them in any way about what we're talking about. And I'll call, I have 4 people on that email because I don't know who I'm supposed to be talking to, and I don't know who's in charge, and they haven't told me who's in charge. Sometimes they tell me it's Rogel. Sometimes they tell me it's Matt. Sometimes they tell me it's the other Matt. Sometimes they tell me it's this new guy who's on the call. So, it's disappointing. And I think you're seeing an operation right now that doesn't have somebody who's taking pride in what it's supposed to be. And for all the faults of the LCS, at least somebody gave a shit at the top about what it was. And right now, I think there's just we just have some axemen, and they get to wear the mask a little bit.
So why do you think I think one of your demands that you listed was quite reasonable, in that you asked that Riot commits to a revenue pool for player salaries of $300K per NACL team per year, which would be the equivalent of, if there's, be $3 million for 10 of these teams. It's the equivalent of a revenue share for an additional LCS team, which doesn't seem that outrageous, right? You're basically saying you are increasing, by 10% or so the cost of the revenue sharing for the league. And that obviously if there was a discretionary budget that had to be spent on challenger teams, that would be different than what we're seeing right now, where ostensibly teams are cutting the challenger teams because they want to focus those revenues onto their LCS teams, right? That's
or elsewhere.
or elsewhere, literally taking that money and doing other things with it. That's definitely a possibility too. But as of right now, like, that seems like a pretty reasonable approach to this. So from your perspective, why does Riot themselves not want to prop up the amateur team if they believe, as you do, that having a pipeline of North American players is key to the success of LCS?
Well, I think that there's certainly some misleading. I mean, we see in one post and one report from someone like Mr. Needham, conversations about still building the future of sport and, a commitment to the future of sport and shifting of models and things of that nature. And on the other hand,
without any hard details, of course, those
the other
were
hand,
very, very scarce in the information he provided.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think Travis did an interview with Nas and John and asked them about the revenues of the LCS or the spending on the LCS and what was the spend. And we were, they said, oh, well, the budget's flat year over year. We haven't changed the budget, but we've seen the impact of that in reality. Well, 400,000 that came out of Champions Queue. They took all the money out of the investment in that, which killed that product. We had players playing consistently, and once there was not a prize pool, which we knew was an important incentive, so that money got absorbed and put elsewhere. You saw talent rates continue to go down and talent not getting invitations back, and talent experience changing. Obviously, they're moving money around in different places here, and in our opinion, it's not places that are improving the product in any significant way. So, we have questions on the player side about.
I imagine, too, that part of that budget had to be spent on changing the studio, which would have been very expensive, but that was an accommodation for Valorant. The studio did not need to be changed again, by the way. It looked totally fine, but it was designed for League of Legends, and so they probably said, oh, we're going to refresh this. Let's take some of the League of Legends budget, but it was really, a Valorant cost, if we're being real.
Yeah, so, to the larger question, I mean, clearly the money and the priorities are shifting around here. And the explanation for why they thought that this was in any way a good decision, I can only say, is that someone took the bait. Like I've struggled talking with many people, and maybe one of you can proffer a good answer, because they knew that this was going to be public, be a disastrous public decision. They knew that functionally it would be disastrous, as it has been and proven to be already. And they knew that at the end of the day, like they should know at least that they're giving these teams enough money to operate, and they shouldn't be needing to, no team should be in such a dire strait that saving $100,000 over the next couple months is going to be what keeps their lights on. All they've done, if they believe that from a team, is push their bankruptcy date from August to September. Like that's the best case they could have imagined they did here.
That is a good point. But my question too is, like, why do you think the teams want this? Because basically the way that you're presenting this is that it is effectively a suicide pact that is being made between the teams and Riot regarding the LCS.
I'm not sure about suicide pact, but why do teams want this? When I joined Evil Geniuses, we had a plan and we executed on that plan. I give credit in large part to Greg and Andrew, who were the primary architects for our league side, but we had a plan, which was, it's expensive to have players who are veterans on your team. Veterans cost more. This is like a truism of all sports. If you've been around for a while, your second contract, if you're a big player, it's going to cost more. The cheapest players you can have are rookies. It's just your pipeline is your pathway to, and in all sports has always been your pathway to, the most inexpensive labor. And so we said at the outset, we're going to build a developmental pipeline, and our goal within 2 years is to have 2 players from our developmental pipeline be on rookie contracts on our LCS team, because that's how we're going to offset long-term overspending on that roster, and how we thought we could compete with the 6th most spending and be a top 3 team. And after I departed, they completed that mission. They had JoJo and they had Danny, right? And again, I give credit to Greg and Andrew. They did more of that work than I did. But I'll take a small amount of credit because I was in the room when we came up with the plan, and it was a good fucking plan. And you know why it was a good plan? It's because the same plan every fucking team in sports does across the world to try and protect their cost structure is to develop talent. And so, I firmly believe, and I believe that my work at Evil Geniuses speaks to this, that we believe that the best pathway for a team to be financially stable is to operate an NACL roster and to invest in talent pipeline and invest in finding young people. Like, that is the best way to do it. And it's good for the long-term health of the league in every sort of way. So to do that, we think is smart, and you should stay in and you should do it. And, EG, I'll give credit to them. They stuck in. Doesn't sound like they're necessarily committed long term. Maybe they're hoping to hold out for better rules from Riot as well. I would hope that's the case, because I hope that they still have internally a belief that they need to be developing talent. But at the end of the day, you should want to be in there. And that's where we were okay with affiliates, because if you don't understand how to do it, get somebody who does. But the idea that teams just like don't believe in it is, to me, a condemnation of the teams in the biggest way, because every team should be wanting to operate and find and build talent. It makes financial sense. And this is a short-term savings that's going to hurt everybody long-term, because you're just going to have to pay more in the future, because you're going to have less young people coming up who you can find who can plug into your LCS program.
How do you respond to Steve's video then, who said that, only 17% of their academy players had moved on to LCS, and so they see the challenger system as a failure of producing that talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can look at the numbers in different ways and sometimes to see their point of view. He was looking at last year and the year before in specific windows. We look at the totality, which is that something north of 57% of players in the LCS came up through the NACL. And that's not even looking at players like a Huhi, who started in the LCS and then got demoted, and he ended up playing in academy for a year, and he worked his way back up to becoming a pro again. Those are opportunities that also you lose sight of. If a player loses that opportunity and they can't make a living, they might go start another career. They might go to coding school rather than ever coming back in the league, rather than ever standing on the MSI stage again. So those are, we look at a different lens, which is the majority of this league is built from the academy. And Steve's numbers are not inaccurate, but I also think that saying 17% in a year is a bad thing. I don't know why that's a bad thing. That 17% sounds like healthy turnover. It seemed okay to me. But again, we look more holistically at the fact that the majority of this league comes from the NACL. And you take that pipeline away and you shrink that down, and the future looks a lot bleaker.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.